You're listening to the Good Question Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Our goal is to make each of our guests exclaim, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. Because when that happens, it means you, the listener, may be inspired to learn more beyond the interview and to ask great questions yourself that lead to new insights. In this podcast, we cover historical and current anthropology, comparative religion, and history. Welcome, and let's get started.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Good Question Podcast. I have Josh Imhoff. He's the founder of Emerge Aquaponics, and we're going to talk about his backstory and why he's on a mission to utilize aquaponics to help feed the world. So, Josh, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, if you want to tell me a bit about your background story and how you got into aquaponics.
Yeah, so we were trying to figure out how do we help fund people around the world? How do we help feed people around the world? My wife and I grew up traveling all around the world. And as we were traveling, we just saw that there was a lot of need. And so we said, how do we actually help? And so we started multiple different businesses. We started looking at different things we could reproduce. And we landed on aquaponic, more of a way to feed people and fund people. And so we started about 12 years ago, started building aquaponic systems, designing aquaponic systems, taking courses, reading things, and said this is a great way to feed people and to generate income and start businesses for people. So we dove into that and said let's start learning as much as we can. Let's start building. Had lots of failures, messed up a bunch. Now 12 years later, way down the road, looking at how we design, how do we build. I just got back 2 days ago. I was in Costa Rica building, and then we were in South Africa 3 weeks ago. I was in South Africa, but I've learned a lot about aquaponics and how do we use that to feed people good, healthy, organic food that's not going to hurt them and bring some great nutrition and also food they could sell to generate income.
Yeah, so for people that don't know, can you just give a brief description of what an aquaponic system looks like?
Yeah, so aquaponics is two different things. It's horticulture and aquaculture. The aquaculture side, you have fish, it's animal husbandry. You're growing fish, you're breeding fish, and that is the fertilizer for the plants. So you have your plants are all growing in water that's fertilized by the fish. So then you can grow. We grow here at our place in Colorado, in Black Forest. We have 25,000 square foot greenhouse, and we grow a lot of leafy greens. So red romaine, green romaine, butterhead bib, red oak leaf. We grow a lot of leafy greens, bok choy. We've grown kale and chard and a bunch of different things. But so it's really the horticulture and aquaculture mixed to just grow. And the great thing about aquaponics is there is fish. So the fish provide a great protein source, especially around the world when we're working in different countries, but also here as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, when you have an aquaponic system, the fish, you don't eat them every time, obviously, because it would be too fast to eat them. But what's the ratio of eating the fish to the plants? Like, I don't know, how long does it take the plants to grow on average versus the fish to grow and be mature enough where they're maybe not useful and ready to be eaten? Yeah,
so the fish, depending on your temperature. So if you're in a warm climate, so we're at 7,000 feet in Colorado. It's cold. We try to keep our temperature of our water at about 72 degrees for our fish to eat and grow. But if you have, depending on what type of fish you use, a lot of people use tilapia in aquaponic systems. You can use we use catfish. We've used all kinds of fish. But the tilapia actually like the water at about 80 to 85 degrees to breed and to do other things, and they'll eat really good at about 80 degrees. So we don't keep it that high, so the fish don't grow as fast as they would in a very warm climate. So our fish take about a year to grow, and the plants, so we start off with, we have 3 separate tanks on our system, and we have different sizes and different tanks. So we have some that are ready for harvesting. We usually harvest them when they're about 1.5 pounds ish. So that takes about a year to 12 to 15 months for our system because we don't keep the temperature very warm for the temperature of the water. So that takes about a year and a half to grow the fish. But we have, about 1,500 fish in the system. So all at different sizes. So we can harvest pretty often, but the plants are usually on an 8-week grow cycle. or 9-week growth cycle. So from seed to harvest, our plants take about 8 weeks mature to harvest and then sell or to give away. So
okay, I got you. So you by the time the fish are full grown, then they're harvested once a year for like a fish bounty, and then the new ones are up and coming by that time, and they're able to run the system.
Yes. So you want to keep right ratio of pounds of fish per your plant growing area. So there's multiple ways to do it, but we do a certain poundage of fish per square foot of grow space that we're growing in on the systems that we have. So that's one of the ways we calculate how many pounds of fish we should have in the system, and then per head square foot of grow space. So we try to keep that number pretty consistent. So when you're harvesting, you want to add more in, obviously, to keep that poundage up.
I've heard from different people, I don't know, probably people that don't like aquaponics very much. One told me they thought that the vegetables would taste fishy from the fish, or that it's very difficult to balance these systems. Like, what are some of the, some of the difficulties in keeping aquaponics, the nuances of doing it right?
There's definitely things that you have to watch and stay on top of. The lettuce or the leafy greens, you would think of a lot of people like, oh, it's going to taste fishy or it's going to taste a certain way, but it doesn't actually bring up any of that. It's more like you're growing in a pond. You want to balance the ecosystem. So a big ecosystem that you're creating. So you're creating bacteria. You have the fertilizer from the fish, then ammonia, and then nitrites, the nitrates, and the bacteria is breaking everything down. So with the bigger systems, they're harder to mess up once they get established because the ecosystem takes longer to build, but then it's harder to adjust, like to mess it up and make it where you have to adjust things. But with the smaller systems, it definitely, you can adjust them very quickly. They can go all over the place. But if you're just consistent, this is what I tell everybody. If you're consistent and you're in there and you're just making sure everything's running well, it's really not as difficult once the system matures. Like, so for our smaller systems that are 1,500 square feet, it takes like 3 to 6 months and then it becomes more mature. Our bigger system, which is like 7,000 square feet, that one took about a little over a year to really mature and get the system balanced right to create that ecosystem where all the good bacteria is growing. And it doesn't adjust very much. But yeah, there's lots of little things that you just have to watch. You're checking on your fish, you're checking on your plants. That's another big thing that people always complain about is, well, you're not just growing, you also are doing animal husbandry with fish, and you're having to take care of the fish and the plants. So you're taking care of two things. But once you get the system really balanced, they really complement each other really well. And it just becomes something that just is happening as you're feeding the fish and you're doing and you're just checking on it. You see that it's not as hard as a lot of people think it should be once you get the system matured.
So what does that mean, make the system matured? What goes into that?
It's really just letting the system grow. So like with any ecosystem, so you have ecosystems all around. This is what you're doing, is creating an ecosystem where the great thing about aquaponics as well is it uses 90% less water because you're just circulating the water. You're just losing it to plant uptake and you're losing it to evaporation. So the system is a closed system. So you're constantly feeding your fish then create the ammonia that goes into your filtration. And then as it goes through your filtration, you create good bacteria. That's what's actually maturing your system. So you want to have really good bacteria growing in the system so that it can break down all of that ammonia and turn it into the nitrates that actually the plants uptake. And so as you're balancing your system and you're getting it matured and you're creating this ecosystem, you're growing the great bacteria. Your fish and your water health is really good, and you're getting it to the point where you're not having to add a bunch of stuff to the system. It's there's only a handful of things you don't get in growing in aquaponics that you would get in the ground. So like iron is one of those things. And so we add iron to our system. But once you get the system matured as far as the bacteria is correct, it's producing tons of nitrates for you so that the plants can uptake that and grow. It's really just giving it time to create the bacteria.
So you're monitoring the bacteria levels and amounts? Like, how do you do that?
So when you're first starting, and we were just teaching a course, I was just down in Costa Rica teaching a course on this. And, that first few months, you're wanting to testing for your iron levels, you're testing for your nitrates and your nitrites and your ammonia, and you're testing all these different things to make sure that they're growing right. Your ammonia levels aren't getting too high because it'll kill your fish. And you have to have so you're testing at the beginning as you're maturing the system, like I was saying, you're testing quite often just to make sure everything's balanced. You can use the little kits where you drops in it, or you can get electronic kits that actually read everything for you. And so depending on how much money you want to spend and how much you want to get really into it, you can have the simple kits that cost $30 that you can test everything with, or you can get into all the electronic readers that tell you your oxygen readings. So you want your oxygen to be at a certain level so that your fish are healthy and your plants are healthy. And so you can have all these different readers that you can purchase and then use, or you can just do it all with manually with the droplets.
So you're not testing for the levels of bacteria. You're inferring that they're there based on the levels of nitrites and nitrates and all that stuff.
Yes. So as you're growing, you'll start to notice that your ammonia levels going down because your bacteria is breaking it down. So you're not having to test for your bacteria. We do, because we're actually USDA certified for good handling practices. And so we do test our water every month, send it away and get tests. And so we actually know what our bacteria level's at. But a lot of systems, that it's healthy because you don't need to test for it because it's breaking down that ammonia. And that your bacteria levels are in a good spot because your ammonia levels are dropping.
How do you deal with the fish? Because they have a much longer cycle than the plants. So, how do the fish react when the plants are first planted versus when they're in the vegetative stage versus when they produce the vegetables versus when you pull them out and you put new ones in? I would think all that would dramatically change the load, the recirculatory load of what's going back to the fish, the nutrients that are pulled out and not pulled out.
Yeah, it's interesting because you are creating this ecosystem. So everyone always goes, well, the water that's coming straight from the fish tanks, is that more nutrient dense than the water that's at the end after the plants have been uptaking as much of the nutrients as possible? But you really get your nitrates and all of that at a certain level, and it just stays there. And it's throughout the whole system. So the ecosystem you're creating, it doesn't adjust, especially with the large system, like I said, it doesn't adjust as much as you would think it would. And as you're planting, so like if you do take all the plants out, if you don't design the system, then the water could become toxic for the fish. But our system that we've designed actually has enough filtration that we could just run the fish tanks by themselves without having any plants in it. But yeah, it doesn't really affect it too much when you are taking plants out, plants in. You will notice when you're going from growth cycles, and if you're on a heavier growth cycle or a longer growth cycle, so like a 10-week or a 8-week or a 7-week, how much do you really need to plant? You'll see that the nitrates will be absorbed, and then you'll know, okay, there's a lot of plants in the system versus not having a lot of plants in the system. But it really won't affect the plants that much because you should have it balanced enough to where you have the right ratio of fish for all the plants in the system.
So are you staggering the production of the plants and staggering the production of the fish? Like I was thinking about the fish, like, it would be frustrating to wait a whole year and just eat them once a year, and possibly wasteful. There's so many that are produced. So do you stagger everything so you're getting a little bit at a time the whole year?
Yes. So the plants you're planting. So in our system, I'll just use our one system. We plant 4,000 heads of lettuce, different varieties of leafy greens. We plant 4,000 heads every single week, and we harvest 4,000 heads every single week. So, and then if it's on a 8-week growth cycle, 32,000 plants that would be in the system at one time. So you would have all different ages and sizes. Because if it's 8 weeks and you're harvesting 4,000 and you're planting 4,000. So that one you have on an 8-week growth cycle constantly. So every single week we're pulling out 4,000 heads of leafy greens. And then with the fish, the same thing. We stagger those. So we have different fish tanks and different sizes in different fish tanks so that, and they grow at different sizes as well. So once they get to that 1.5 pounds, so we can harvest every month 1.5 pound fish multiple times, like multiple fish every month. You could even set it up to where you could do it every week. We just do it probably every month. Every 2 months, we'll pull out the bigger fish, and then we harvest those and teach people how to do that. So during our classes.
Okay. So what are some of the, I don't know, the tips or tricks that you're able to say that help people be successful in aquaponics? Where do you see them getting stuck quite often?
I think, people, they get overwhelmed by, like I said earlier, the plants and the fish, and how do you take care of it? And it's difficult with all the pumps and the sizing. I think the science and the knowing of how much water flow. So you want to pump water in the beds a certain way. You want to pump the water in your fish tanks a certain way. So we only have a dwell time of about 45 minutes in our fish tanks. So it pumps out that water pretty quick. And then our grow beds have about a 4-hour dwell time, which that means each bed has the water is getting replenished by our pumping from the fish tanks every 4 hours. So the science behind it is where I think a lot of people get stuck in the pump sizing and knowing how fast you should do it, because there's so many different books out there and so many different trains of thought. And so it's hard to land on anything where, like, just an example, one of the books say you can have 0.3 pounds of fish to 1.5 pounds of fish per square foot of grow space. That's a huge ratio, or it's a huge difference. And so people are like, well, what is it? Is it 1.5 pounds? Is it 0.3? Is it 0.1? Is it 0.7? And so I think there's not like, this is the way to do it. That's why we actually designed a system with all the pumps and everything that we build all around the world. It's the exact same system every single time. We know it works. But I think that's what scares people away a lot of times, is they're thinking, this is way too hard, and this is going to be complicated with the pump sizing and the water heating and all the different things that you're trying to keep track of. But once you get it dialed in, that's what we found, is just being consistent. If you're just out there checking it, walking around, looking at everything, and just making sure everything is flowing right, you're listening for the air pumps and the water pumps and making sure all the filters are cleaned, and you're just consistent doing the same stuff every day, it's really not hard to grow. But that's what everybody thinks is going to be the hardest part. And so when we do our trainings, it's mostly hands-on. One of the guys that we're training currently has like a first grade education in another country, and they're going to be able to run the whole thing. And so it doesn't take a lot of education. It's just really being consistent. And that's where we've seen the most success, is the hands-on, staying consistent, and going out every day and checking it. And so, and even my kids all know how to run the system. It's not I think it's the scariness. You have water, you have fish, you have the plants, you're doing multiple things, the science behind it. How do you know if everything's growing right? That's what I think scares people away a lot. And we've just seen that if you can take that fear away and say, listen, if you build this system this way and you just stay consistent with it and you watch it and take care of it, you're going to grow. And we've seen that happen all around the world, where once we took away the science side of, they need to know science, and they need to know, hey, this is when you feed your fish, and this is the bacteria section, and you got to make sure this is healthy and don't spill stuff into the system and all of that. But we've seen people that are young, people that are old. The other great thing about it is it's not labor intensive. So you're not having to pick up a bunch of weeds. You're not bending over. You're just harvesting normally. Like it's actually the time. It doesn't take a ton of time either to grow this way. Which is also a huge benefit.
So what are some of the major inputs that you don't need because you have the fish and the plants that you would normally need? And then what are the major inputs that you still need because of them?
Yeah. So, you're watching it. A lot of times you can do inputs through your fish feed, depending on what kind of fish feed ratios you have. That'll actually add nutrients to the system.
Yeah. Like what are you feeding the fish? Can you feed them the plants, or you got to feed them fish pellets, or what do you give them?
Yeah, so right now we do all organic fish feed that we get that are pellets that float. And so we purchase that. So that is an input that you put into the system. And then you have iron, like I said earlier. So the iron, and you have magnesium, you have potassium. There's certain things that you want to add to the system that you can't get in the water that you get in the ground. So there's a little bit of additives depending on how good your water is too. If you have a well or if you're doing city water, depending on what's in the water that you're actually adding to the system. So as you're growing, you just have those few inputs that you're adding in to make sure the system has the right amount of potassium, the right of magnesium, the right amount of iron, because if you don't add those things, you're not going to have a head that it won't turn. So with the iron, for an example, if you don't have iron, the plants will look yellow. So you want to have iron in the system so you can tell immediately when your leaves are starting to turn yellow and they're not green, hey, we need to add iron to this because it's obviously changing color and it doesn't look correct. So there's a handful of things like that you have to add, but we actually have a rotation, a schedule that says this is how much you add every single day, or like magnesium sulfate. This is how much you add every week or every month to make sure the system stays balanced with the things that you don't get.
But you're doing these systems all around the world, it sounds like. So in other countries, what are they using, for instance, for fish feed or their other inputs?
Yeah, so we source everything locally. So when we go into a country, we make sure that we can find stuff locally that we would need to put into the system. So we find fish feed. A lot of places, like even as we build these, our design that we came up with is all materials that you can readily find anywhere in the world. And we did that on purpose so we wouldn't have to import things from other countries so that they would have everything to fix the system if something broke. But yeah, you can find pretty much everything as far as the supplements, like the fish feed, because almost everywhere is growing fish. And so we usually just go and find it, source everything locally in that country.
That makes sense. You said you experimented with different types of fish. Everyone seems to talk about tilapia only. But you said they need 80-degree heat and water. So what other kinds of fish have you tried, and have any of them worked surprisingly well, or what's your favorites?
It's really the market too. And the reason I think we tell everyone to start with tilapia is because tilapia is such a hardy fish. That's why they have a bad rap too, because you can have high stocking densities. You don't have to really take care of them as much. They grow fast. And so the conversion rate of feed to meat is really high with fish. But tilapia is just a hardy fish where they can get down. We've had when the heat went out in our greenhouse, our fish tanks got down to 59 degrees and they stayed alive, and they can go up to 85 degrees. You have a huge swing, so it's hard to kill them. And so starting with an easier fish, and even growing leafy greens, starting with the easier things to grow and learning how to do that. That's how I recommend everybody, even when you're growing plants. I say start with a monocrop. Just start with one thing, grow it really well, learn how to grow it, learn how your system reacts to different things, and then switch to other things. So even with the tilapia, I say start with tilapia just because it's such a hardy fish. They're hard to kill. If the air goes out, they'll go up to the top and they'll breathe from the top of the tank. There's all these different things that they can survive through. Like I said, the temperature range is a big one as well.
What other kind of fish have you tried, and what interesting results did you get?
Yeah, so we've done actually goldfish, and the tanks, the goldfish get really big, and then you can actually sell those as imitation koi because they get so big. They don't eat them though. And then we've done catfish. Catfish are great as well in other countries. They really do it depends on where you're at, but catfish, we've done a bass. One of our good friends did that here. So you can do different fish. It's just the ability to keep them alive. Like you can do trout, but trout like the water moving really fast and they like it colder. So it really depends on where you're growing and how much time you want to put into the fish side to grow the fish. But yeah, you can use multiple different fish. We just have stuck with tilapia after testing different fish and then finding different fish in other countries that we've built in. Like one of the countries in Central Asia, we do use catfish. We have a tank just full of catfish, but that's part of the market is demanding it. So we usually go into a place and say, what kind of fish do you guys like? And then we try to look and see, should we try to grow that fish? Depending on after they've done it for a while, they can start to play with fish that's more of a demand in their country or in their location.
Right. Has anyone ever been able to do like brackish water fish or even salt water? Did anyone try to grow like seaweed in an aquaponics system or anything you could grow in salt water?
You can't really grow the plants, but you can do like a different type of growing. So it would be saltwater versus like what we're doing, which is with freshwater. So you can grow different things for sure with saltwater, but we do not do anything with that at all. We just are doing freshwater fish and freshwater vegetables.
Are there freshwater shrimp or any other interesting
you can
features
like
you can use?
Yeah, there's crawdads, like there's shrimp, there's fresh water that you could use as well. And there's lots of people that actually do use those in different locations. We're talking about playing with some of that now in different countries to find local things that we could use.
And what is some of the filtration that you need between the fish and the plants, and then the plants and the fish, so that, does everything recirculate, or the things you have to filter out before it's allowed to recirculate?
No, you can not filter anything out. There's solid waste so the way I can just tell you how we have set ours up. And we have the system that has like a solid waste filter. I won't go into technical stuff, but there's a solid waste filter that captures all the solid waste that you can actually use in the ground for farming as well. You can create a tea with it and then reintroduce that back into the system. You just want to break it down, and that'll boost your nitrates really high. If you add that back, we actually filter ours out, and then we may put it into a composting pile because of our USDA certification. They don't want the solid waste getting into where the plants are. But we've built multiple systems where it goes through the solid waste filter first. Then we have another filter that's like a mesh pad that catches anything else that would be going through. And then we have a bio tank that is specifically for creating the bacteria in your biological surface area. So your BSA that you're trying to create in the whole system to have good bacteria growing so it can break everything down. So it goes through the solid waste, then it goes through another filter. Kind of looks like it just looks like a pad where water could go through. And then it goes into our bio tank, and then it just goes into our sump. And then our sump, we actually pump to the grow beds so that the plants will then get the water. And then that, like I said, has a 4-hour dwell time. So we're pumping that water into the grow beds, and then it comes back into the sump, and then we pump that up to the fish tank. So you're constantly just circulating the water.
But are there solids or things that you take out of the system? And then could you use that for, a separate soil-based system as fertilizer?
Yes. And that's actually one of the things that we're doing. We send all of our solid waste into our composting pile, and then we use that for growing in the ground. And so that is very nutrient rich. You can actually sell spray bottles of that for a topical spray, or even for putting onto your plants that you're growing in your house. But it's great fertilizer, that the solid waste that you're pulling out.
Okay. So what's the future of your operation? Do you want to just go to more places, or do you have specific goals in terms of the number of farms or people you feed? Like, where's this going?
We were just talking about that this morning. We have a goal so we just created a reproducible model that we can take anywhere in the world. So that's been the last 2 years. We've been working on that. We've created manuals. We have build manuals. We have operations manuals, business manuals. And so we're trying now, at this point, we're doing trainings around the world. So like I said, I was in Costa Rica last week doing training, and we have a team there training people. I'll be in South Africa in January doing training. And so our goal was to build 23 of these by the end of next year, these new systems that now we have all the manuals for. But we're trying to build hubs that we can do trainings. So in South Africa, we're going to train about 20 to 30 people in the month of January. Then those 20 to 30 people will go back to their places. So we do this with orphanages, widows' homes, organizations that are just feeding people. And so we have one orphanage that we've helped build for that now is funding itself because they sell all the produce. We have widows' homes that we've built for so that they can feed themselves. So there's two different things that we're trying to accomplish: is train a bunch of people in the way that we do it. So next year, we're hoping to train about 200 people and we want to build, 40 to 50 systems. And so then we can keep training more people so they can keep coming back to the places that we've done the training at and built a system for. So we're finding partners right now all around the world that want to do this with us. We're working with multiple organizations that are saying, hey, can you build one at our place, and we'll do training for all of our staff, so then they can go out and do this all around the world as well. So we're hopefully, our goal is to build thousands of these all around the world so people can feed their families and fund their families. And especially with the global food crisis that's going on right now, there's stats that are coming out from the World Food Program and other places saying that this next year is going to be a really hard year for food because of the supply chain issues and other things that are happening with the wars that are happening. So our goal is to build as many of these as we possibly can globally so that people will be able to feed their families and fund their families and have good, healthy food. So, yeah.
What's a quick metric? So if I don't know if you offer this training for people that want to do it individually for their family, or if it has to be like a big, commercial concern. But first of all, that's the first question. Do you offer it for individuals, or is it just larger concerns to make a big system?
Well, so the way we designed the system that we have an 800 square foot, a 1,500 square foot, and then we have larger systems that we've designed and built. But, for us, when we were looking at a system that we wanted to reproduce all around the world, was what could a family live off of and run and manage, and it wouldn't take a ton of time, but they could build a system and then they could fund their whole family off of. So the 1,500 square foot model is for that. Most places around the world, most people don't make a lot of money. So if we can build a system that could actually fund a family and make them $1,000 a month, that's actually a really good wage around the world. So that's why we designed the system the size that we designed it, was to generate about $1,000 a month for a family. And so
is that to feed them and they sell enough to make $1,000 a month, or is it either or?
Yeah, you can do both, because you're depending on what kind of crops you're growing. Like I said, I usually would say stick with a monocrop to start with. So we usually go in, as I go into different countries, is we go and look at what is a cash crop we could sell or grow. A lot of leafy greens, pretty much everywhere in the world. Like I was in Central America and went to the grocery stores, and we could sell to the grocery stores for like 50 cents, 60 cents a head. And so if we can sell for that, the way we designed the system too is it grows 650 heads a week, 52 weeks a year. So if you're selling for 50 cents, you're making $325 a week, which comes out to about $1,300. So then you have your operating costs and everything else. So that'll knock it down to about $900 to $1,000. So that's kind of the metrics that we went with when we were designing this specific system. You can do any systems, and we were just trying to get to a consistent system that we knew would generate enough heads of lettuce or enough leafy greens or whatever you were trying to grow that we could generate enough money to fund a family or an orphanage or a widow's home. So that would be enough to cover operational costs for an organization, a smaller organization around the world. So that's what we went with, and that's we picked the 650 heads a week is what we're growing of, like a red romaine or a green romaine, or a butterhead bib, whatever you want to grow. So that's how we came up with the number we came up with and the size of the system we did. But you can make systems any size. You could have a system that could just feed your family, which we've built some of those, where that's what I started actually learning on. We built a little system in our backyard that fed my family, and we were growing tomatoes and cucumbers and peppers and lettuce and all different types of things. So
that's really cool. Yeah. That's really
cool.
Yeah,
that's the way we designed and went after the size that we went after. So that's that 800 to 1,500 square feet system. That 1,500 square foot is the number that we landed on to try to generate enough to fund people.
Oh, so 1,500 square foot system that'll feed a family, let's say, at 4 or 5, and then it'll also produce about $1,000 a month income.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then and that doesn't include the fish or anything else. The fertilizer you could sell. There's other things that you could add on. That's just the produce.
Okay, gotcha. I mean, so if people utilize the full system, though, then what would it bring?
Oh, you could, depending on the cost of fish, the cost of fertilizers. Fertilizer, I was just in South Africa 3 weeks ago, and the cost of fertilizer has tripled in the last 6 months because it's so hard to get. So you could start selling all these different pieces and generate a lot more money for your family if you wanted to start selling everything. One of the things we were doing is starting seeds, because it's a great environment for starting seeds into to where they're about 2 weeks old to 4 weeks old. You can grow those in your system, and you can actually resell those as starters to other people as well. So there's multiple things that we've seen happen in other countries that we've started as businesses, side businesses off of it, besides just selling the produce.
Yeah. So, what do people pay to get this material in order to do a system? Like, do they pay a consulting fee and licensing fees, or how does it work if someone's listening and they want to start up their own system?
Yeah. So we're partnering with a bunch of different organizations. Right now, it's really just the fee to come get trained by us. So we have our training in South Africa. We have our training in Costa Rica. We have training in Central Asia. So we push people to come to those trainings, and we have our training here in Colorado Springs. So we just say, come do the training with us, and then you'll get everything for free after that. We're looking at a consulting fee. That's why we're mostly working with organizations. So we only have to consult one person at an organization, not 50 different people. Then they can consult their people once we've trained them. But yeah, so you get all of our manuals, you get all of our training when you come here and do the training either here or around the world. And then we're just trying to help people pretty much then after that grow the food and get out there and start making the system reproducible around the world. So
yeah. How long is the training if somebody comes to Colorado Springs?
We're trying to now, it's about 4 weeks, and we know that that's a hurdle for a lot of people. So we're videoing a lot of it so that you can do a lot online before you come here. And then you might need to spend a week or two here on the property just to see the system, how it's built, do some hands-on stuff with us so that you can really get the information. And then we send you back with all the manuals that tell you exactly how to build it, how to operate it, your daily, your weekly, your monthly, your quarterly tasks to keep everything running well. So we're trying to shorten that on-ramp a little bit so that it's not as hard to get people to come and get trained. So we're trying to move a lot digitally online.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Any other aspects of the system of the business that we didn't touch on that you want to bring up? We got a few minutes left if you want.
Yeah, it's a lot of people, when you're growing aquaponically, the reason that we chose aquaponics as well is because of the water usage, because like I said, do a lot in Southern Africa, and they've been in drought for years. And so there's not a lot of water. And so that's another big, huge piece of why we chose aquaponics was the water usage. And even here in Colorado, we don't have a lot of water. And so it's really conserves water. And then as a business, just getting into the community and really helping people, loving people, giving good food to people. This is some of the best produce you can get. We actually had one of the top buyers for Whole Foods, one of the purchasers. He came out and did a tour, and he said, can I just take a look? He was looking at it, and he said, can I taste it? And we don't use any pesticides, because if you use pesticides, it'll kill your fish. So you have to grow organically pretty much. And so he just ripped off some leaves and started tasting it. And he said, this is the best looking and the best tasting lettuce I've ever had. And so, it's like your question earlier, you don't get the fishy taste. And if you do add a lot of chemicals, you'll get a little salty taste. So, and we don't add any real chemicals other than the stuff that we have to add to make it like the iron and things. But yeah, it's a great product. And, us doing it here in the U.S. side is how do you grow things locally and buy locally and help your community to have stuff that's available that's year round that you normally would have to get shipped in from other places. And really, like with our produce here in Colorado, most of it's shipped in from California. So just helping, growing things locally and then allowing people to, just have a place that's theirs here in our community. So it's been really interesting seeing the way that our community is loves to come out and just help. We actually have volunteers that come out, and then we give them heads of lettuce. They get to take bags of lettuce home, but families come, schools come, and just help volunteer and just want to be a part of growing stuff locally in our community. So that's really something I wasn't expecting. I thought we're just going to grow lettuce, teach people how to grow food all around the world, but it's been a huge blessing here in our community in Black Forest.
Excellent. Well, very good, Josh. What's a way for people to find out more and to see what is involved in the training and to interact with you guys? Where can they go?
You can go to YWAM Emerge, EMERGE.org, or you can go to emergeaquaponics.com. And you can check out all of our information, what we do, the stuff we're doing globally, the stuff we're doing here locally. And you can shoot us an email, and we'd love to connect. And yeah, that'd be great.
Well, very good, Josh. It's been a great call. And thank you so much for the work that you're doing and for talking about aquaponics. So thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Good Question Podcast. Please email support@thegoodquestionpodcast.com if you have any referrals to great guests for us to interview. Visit thegoodquestionpodcast.com to hear more interviews. And please help us spread the word by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to this podcast.